So, how are your New Year's resolutions going?
New Year's comes with holiday cheer and plenty of resolutions to do better next year.
I'm just curious, how many of you made New Year's resolutions? Okay. How many of you kept them?
All right, doctor, if you wouldn't mind, set the expectation here. How likely is it that someone will say, quit smoking, save up for that big trip, lose extra weight by the end of the year?
Not very likely. So
Really,
I know
okay.
that. I'm sorry. I'm starting New Year's with bad news.
Let's be reasonable.
But let's be real, right?
Don't worry if you're struggling, because you're not alone.
When we ask people, we find that only about a quarter tells us that they're still pursuing the resolutions on the following November.
But we do have someone who can help.
Part of the reason that many goals do fail and fail more than what we might think is healthy is because we don't have a good system of following through.
That's Ayelet Fishbach. She's a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago, and her brand new book, Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation, is already in the top charts on Amazon.
Motivation science is part of the behavioral science, and specifically it's a field that is interested in how to get people to achieve their goals, what gets us out of bed in the morning and doing whatever it is that important for us to do. And I can't think of anything that is more important to study.
So in a year when fulfilling our goals and resolutions feels more pressing than ever, while our motivation may be at its lowest, let's do what we do best. Turn to science to get some concrete answers on how to actually follow through.
You need to understand what's missing for you. Not so much about getting everything right, but about what is the ingredient that you need to work on. What will get you to be happier at work, or exercise more, or connect to people more. Is it that you didn't set the right goal? Is it how you monitor progress? How this fits with your other goals or social support? And really understanding what's the ingredient that is missing in your recipe is often the recipe for success.
From the University of Chicago Podcast Network, this is Big Brains, a podcast about the pioneering research and pivotal breakthroughs that are reshaping our world. On this episode, the science behind motivation. I'm your host, Paul Rand. When it comes to following through on our goals, it's actually best to start all the way back at the beginning.
In order to set a goal that will pull you, a goal that will work for you, you want to start with a goal that is not a means to another goal.
For example, a goal you're more likely to be motivated to complete would be get a new job, rather than apply for jobs. You want the job itself, the work of applying for it is a chore. If you set the chore as the goal, you're less likely to be motivated.
People don't like to work on something that is not the thing itself.
Now, this may seem arbitrary, but the science shows it actually makes a huge difference. Fishbach demonstrated the power of this with a study using a book from another Chicago behavioral scientist, Nobel Prize winner Richard Thaler. They asked incoming university students to bid on how much they would pay for a signed copy of his famous book.
So the average bidder was giving, I think, $23. Then we went to another group of students and we offered them a University of Chicago tote bag that contained the same signed book. Now, this is a better deal, but we asked them how much they are willing to pay for the tote bag. And we tell them that this tote bag will come with a book inside it, but you need to name the price for the tote bag. And the average person was willing to pay something like $12, okay?
Just putting the same exact book in a tote bag caused people to cut what they were willing to pay for it in half.
Which makes absolutely no sense. Why would a tote bag and a book would worth less than just the book? But demonstrated our point that people are willing to pay a lot for a book, but not for the thing that will carry that book.
Because the book itself is the goal, while the tote bag is the means of carrying the book, and our brains don't like means. This is why many companies build the shipping into the cost of the item. It's not that you aren't willing to pay, it's that you don't want to pay for the means to the end. This simple idea and goal setting can change your motivation to get it done all the way through. Owning a house is better than saving for a down payment. Getting healthy is better than eating vegetables.
Set a goal that is a goal, that's not a means to another goal.
Which brings us to another important point when it comes to thinking about how to frame our goals. Do goals versus do not goals.
People often set do not goals, avoidance goals. These are much less effective than approach goals, than do goals.
For instance, a do goal would be eating healthy. A do not goal would be avoiding unhealthy foods. It's the same goal, but the phrasing makes a big difference for your motivation.
Deciding not to do something is much harder than deciding to do something. The classic studies ask people not to think about white bears. This is practically impossible.
Sorry, a white bear?
A white bear, yeah. Try not to think about a white bear.
You look like a white bear to me right now. Why is that?
Right? Yeah, you're now going through your mind, you're checking, am I thinking about white bear? Oh, I do. Oh, no, I should stop. The chaos of avoidance goals, that as you try to avoid it, you constantly think, am I still doing it? And brings it back to mind. So these goals are less effective.
Now a word of warning. Fishbach says there are some people who actually will do better with do not goals. She calls them avoiders.
Yes, avoiders are a little bit better with their avoidance goals. They are more motivated by avoiding certain states. They are more motivated by avoiding risk, maintaining safety, which tends to be more of the flavor of avoidance.
A quick way to figure out which one you are? Well, when you're playing a board game or a sport, do you say, I really want to win, or I really don't want to lose? If it's the second, you're probably an avoider.
Also, I would say that avoidance goals tend to appear more urgent. If you do the exercise of asking yourself, what do you need to do in order to, let's say, be healthy, or what do you need to avoid in order to be healthy, what you need to avoid will appear more urgent. And so in the short run, we are all a bit more avoiders than approachers.
Okay, so you're shaping or reshaping your goals and resolutions in your head. Next, we need to figure out how we're going to measure our progress. And Fishbach says the science shows it's best to have very specific targets.
Yes, so it's often nice to have a number on your goal, to have a specific target which tells you how much and how soon.
Perhaps you've heard of the 10,000 step rule. It's the number most Fitbits use as a standard daily step goal, and generally doctors agree that the number is best for your health. Well,
it was kind of made up, okay? It was a marketer that came up with the idea. It was in Japan in the 60s. People were starting to be aware of exercising. They hosted the Olympics at that time. And someone came up with the idea that people need to walk 10,000 steps a day. That was, not surprisingly, the marketer of the pedometer. And then it stuck.
Even though it was made up, it works. Japan became one of the healthiest populations, and the rule went international. Our brains are obsessed with measuring our progress, and a specific number gives us a useful tool.
If you know that this is your goal and you just did 9,900 steps, you feel disappointed. Okay, if you did 100 steps above, then you are really not that happy. Like it really doesn't matter. Okay, like there is something about meeting this specific number that is highly motivating.
Well, I've also, in terms of athletic pursuits, is this whole idea of the 4-hour marathon, isn't it?
Yes, and another research looked at the distribution of marathon running times, and the researchers, two of them are here at Booth, George Wu and Devin Pop, looked at almost 10 million marathon runners in the US and looked at their times. And when they looked at the distribution, they noticed something very odd. There are many more people that finish the marathon at 3 hours and 59 minutes than 4 hours and 1 minute. Now, why is that? Obviously, it's not easier to finish the marathon 2 minutes earlier, and this time are very close to each other. But the reason is that people really want to run a marathon under 4 hours. That target is highly motivating.
Wow, that's a really vivid example. Tell me about, because it fell into the same category here of the idea of loss aversion, and I'm wondering what that is and how that fits into this discussion.
So loss aversion, just to remind people, is the idea that we care about losses more than the absence of gains. To give you an example, we don't want to pay for the shopping bag when we go grocery shopping, so we'll bring our bag from home. But if the store is giving us credit for the bag that we are bringing from home, then we don't really care about it, okay? Like the gain is not very important. The loss is something that we want to avoid.
When we have a specific target, it helps our loss aversion kick in and motivates us to finish the goal. But with a wealth of different targets for any goal, it's important to pick the right one.
Yes, so food labeling is an interesting example of giving people information that's supposed to help them monitor their goals, supposed to help them specifically monitor their food consumption, and supposedly all the information is there. When you take a pack of any food in the grocery store, it tells you everything you need to know about the food, including calories if you are monitoring calorie consumption. But all these numbers are just not good numbers.
Anyone who has ever tried to count calories as their target knows what she's talking about.
They are very hard to intuitively use as you monitor your progress toward your goal, as you monitor your food consumption in this case. When you look at the dessert, you see chocolate, okay? You don't see calories.
But what if instead of calories, food was labeled with the amount of hours you would have to exercise to burn it off? One study found telling teenagers they would have to jog for an hour to burn off a bottle of soda cut consumption.
People were trying different systems. One system that seems to be better than calories is the traffic light, basically marking food as red, green, or orange. And green, orange, you can eat as much as you want. Red, orange, really be careful. And, orange in between. Much more intuitive.
Right. Very much intuitive. Well, I guess that kind of gets to this idea of getting incentives and goals aligned. And so if our listeners are at the point of saying, I want to set up my goals for the year, how does incentives and goals kind of work together to help folks do that?
Yeah, incentives are interesting. Often we incentivize the wrong part of the behavior. Okay, for example, we might incentivize how quickly we finish a project and not how well the job is. Or we might be too hesitant to use uncertain incentives, which actually work better. So basically, 3 things to be aware of. Don't use too many incentives. Don't incentivize the wrong thing. And don't be afraid with uncertain or inconsistent incentives.
What do you mean by an uncertain incentive?
Uncertain incentives are incentives where we don't know if we're going to get it. Studies that we did with people show that when they weren't sure how much they're going to get paid, they were working harder. So, to give you an example, we did a study in which we asked people to drink a lot of water. And if they can do that, they are going to, in one condition, that is for some people, they're going to get $2. For the other group of people, we told them that they're going to get either $1 or $2, will flip a coin. This other group is in an inferior condition, right? The most that they can get is $2. This is the guaranteed payment for the first group. Nevertheless, the people that were promised either $1 or $2, that were uncertain about how much they are going to get paid, were more likely to finish the task. Just a quick word of warning, don't do this at home. When you ask people to drink a lot of water, you really need to know how much water you ask them to drink, because drinking too much water is risky. So don't try it.
Okay. And then there's also this concept of the dilution principle.
Yes, the dilution principle refers to activities that serve multiple goals. Okay? And activities that serve multiple goals are usually beneficial. Okay? We should usually prefer them. It's like feeding 10 birds with one scone, if I can be friendly to the vegetarians.
And the bakers.
And the bakers, exactly. But as it turned out, when something serves multiple purposes, we tend to think that it is less beneficial, less instrumental for each of these purposes, for each of these goals. Okay, in a way, the mental connection between the activity and the goal that it serves is getting diluted by adding more activity. And one of the earlier studies that my team here ran was with a laser pointer. We asked people to check the laser pointing function of the laser pointer and then looked at which pen they use in order to write their name. People that had the opportunity to inspect the laser pointing of the laser pen were not using this pen to write their name, whereas those that never used the laser pointer, that were barely aware that this pen is also a laser pointer, were using it as a pen.
The more goals or incentives that something has, the less we connect it to the central goal. One study found the food labels like sizzling Szechuan green beans with toasted garlic increased consumption over nutritious green beans by 30%. When you're eating, the goal is to enjoy the taste. Emphasizing the goal of health makes us think the food won't taste good. This is called the overjustification effect.
So the overjustification effect is related to dilution. It happens when you have too many reasons to do something. And so you start to believe that some of these reasons are not really good reasons. More recently, we showed that when you tell kids ages 3 to 5, when you tell them the food is going to make them strong and smart, they conclude that this food doesn't taste very good.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's the same food. Like we took 3-year-old and we either told them that some crackers will make them smart or strong, or we didn't tell them that, and they didn't like to eat the crackers when they thought it will make them smart and strong.
Okay, so now we've set up the right goal with the right incentives, but it's halfway through and we're struggling to keep going. The science behind making it through those tough moments after the break. Hello, Big Brains listeners. The University of Chicago Podcast Network is excited to announce the launch of a new show. It's called Entitled, and it's about human rights. Co-hosted by lawyers and U Chicago Law School professors Claudia Flores and Tom Ginsberg, Entitled explores the stories around why rights matter and what's the matter with rights.
All right, I am putting my goals together in my head, and now I'm going to think about how do I keep going? And you got to this point where you said, by the time you got to the fourth quarter, only a quarter of people are keeping with their New Year's resolutions goals. So something has fallen off for them. And talk to me about monitoring, because monitoring progress as a whole sounds like that's a really important component. But I'm not exactly sure. How do you monitor progress on such things?
Basically, you can monitor progress either in terms of what you have done so far, so your completed actions, or what is left, that is missing actions to complete the goal. And how you monitor your goal would really affect your motivation.
It may seem like a small thing, but knowing when to look back or look forward can make a huge difference.
Let's take goals that people are less committed to, like students that are studying for a class that they don't really care for very much, that they are not really sure that this is for them. What we find is that if they look back at how much they have done, they are much more motivated to study than if they look ahead at all the materials that they haven't covered yet. Interestingly, this reverses for the highly committed students, for the students that are studying for the most important class. They absolutely determined that they need to get an A, highlighting their missing actions. Okay, the materials that they have not covered will be more motivating.
Whether you're looking backward or forwards, I think we can all agree that the hardest part of any goal is the middle, and the science backs that up.
Let me mention a couple of studies here. One was very simple. We just asked people that were observing the Hanukkah holiday, whether they light the candles on the first night, the second night, all the way to the 8th night. And people who observe Hanukkah are supposed to light the menorah over these 8 nights. Almost everyone was lighting the menorah on the first night. Many people were lighting the menorah on the last night. In the middle, not so much. Okay, this is when they were busy. We then brought it in the lab and gave people a series of shapes printed on a piece of paper and a pair of scissors. And the first shape that they cut, they did a good job. Okay? They managed to get it just right. The last one, they did a pretty good job. In the middle, they literally cut corners. That is, they cut the corners of these shapes. And so middles are hard. We lose our motivation to work on the goal. We also lose our motivation to do it right, to follow our high performance standards.
So is there anything we can do about this problem? Well, once again, it's a matter of framing.
The way to combat that is by keeping middles short.
What does that mean, keep middle short?
It means have a monthly saving goal and not an annual saving goal.
I see. Okay.
A weekly exercise goal has a very short middle.
You can also create artificial beginnings to avoid middles. As Fishbach writes in the book, you can think of lunch as happening at the beginning of the afternoon instead of the middle of the day, and you'll probably make better choices. But what to do about the elephant in the room, or the white bear in the room, as it were? Temptations. Many times we could have made it through if it weren't for that piece of chocolate cake in the cafeteria.
Temptations are all around us, but the problem with all these temptations, or most of these temptations, is that if you do it just once, nothing happens, okay? If you leave a mess in the kitchen once, that's fine. Your family will not be too upset with you. If you eat just one thing that you shouldn't be eating, or drink just one thing that you shouldn't be drinking, or smoke just one thing that you shouldn't be smoking, nothing happens, okay? Overspeeding once, usually you'll stay alive.
This can lead to the what the hell effect, which you'll remember if you listen to our episode with Katie Milkman. Giving into temptation just once often causes people to give up entirely. Ayelet says the way to combat this is with a broad decision frame.
That is thinking about many opportunities together. To give you an example from a study, again, I will refer to another study of one of my colleagues here at Booth, Abby Sussman. She looked at how much money people spend on exceptional expenses. Okay, these things that you buy just once in a while, okay, like champagne, a ticket to the theater. And people tend to spend much more money than what they planned on these kind of expenses because it's just like once, okay? Just like one bottle of champagne. I don't know when I will buy another one again, or just like one time that I go to the theater. Her way of getting people to control their expenses was to get them to think about all the times that you are going to buy champagne this year. Right? The number of times that you will go to the theater. Okay, how many trips, like vacations, do you plan to take? Like how many nights are you going to stay in a hotel? And then people in this broad decision frame, they realize that they should control their spending.
Another tip Ayelet suggests is to use distant self-talk. Instead of asking, should I have this piece of cake, you should ask yourself, should I, Paul Rand, have this piece of cake? Or, of course, insert your own name. This helps us to distance ourselves from the temptation. Of course, Paul Rand is going to slip at some point, but Ayelet says that it might not be the end of the world.
Well, there are benefits to failing, but people often don't realize it. It's surprisingly difficult to learn from failure, which is, by the way, in every graduation speech, people talk about how important it is to learn from failures. And like in companies, people are talking about how important it is to learn from failure. People talk about how important it is to learn from failure because it's really hard to do. And it's hard to do because first it stinks, okay? We feel bad when we fail, so we don't pay attention. Okay, in my experiments, when people fail, they say that, "Oh, this experiment is just not for me," and they just stop paying attention. The other reason is that you need to do a mental flip when you fail. Okay, you need to say, "Well, if this doesn't work, then I should take the other way." And, this is not very, very intuitive. Like in our experiments, people often just don't realize that if one way doesn't work, then what you need to learn is to use the other way. There is really good information in failure. And so despite the fact that it's not intuitive to learn from failure, we should try to do it.
What should I learn out of failure then?
First, sometimes there is just more information in failure because there are several ways to succeed, but fewer ways to fail. If you are in a restaurant where all the entries are amazing except for one, you really want to know about the one that you should not order. If you're at the university where all the classes are amazing, but there are just a few that are not so great, you want to know about them. There's more information in what can go wrong when it's rare. Okay. Second, when people talk about failures, they are often more thoughtful. They give better information. So when I ask you what went wrong, you will often give me a more detailed answer. You will often reflect on more aspects. And so asking people about what goes wrong often gives you good information.
That's and hopefully you take that better learning to succeed the next time because you've analyzed it more.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the interventions is to ask people about their failures, to learn from others' failures. It's actually often easier to learn from others' failures.
Which brings us to our final ingredient for following through on our goals. Others, our family and our friends, the social supports around us.
Okay, so let's think about social support. It comes in different ways. First, there are the goals that we pursue with other people. Okay, and usually the most important goals in our lives are things that we will do with other people. Okay, it might be professional goals. It might be starting a family, a group project in school, anything that we do with other people. We know that when you put people in a room and they are all supposed to work on the same thing, then they are working much less hard than if they were working by themselves. This is the famous social loafing studies. Even in very simple tasks, the task that comes to my mind is a study that asked people to just generate a lot of noise, but when they were with other people in the room and everybody was generating noise, each person was generating less noise. So even when it's really easy, we do less if other people are around us, and if you were ever in any group meeting, you know that you were thinking less hard than if you had to solve that problem on your own. We design interventions such as identifying individuals' contribution or better mechanism of coordinating effort, division of labor such that people end up doing their best when they are part of a social group. The other part is our individual goals. Surrounding yourself with people that care for your goals, that support your goals is absolutely critical. One of the reasons that people often fail pursuing their goals is that they did not have the social support. They did not have the people in their lives that were helping them, often just by confirming that their goals are important to them.
So in this concept of telling people what you're trying to achieve has a lot of impact or potential impact, doesn't it?
So telling people what you're trying to achieve and getting them to support that, okay? And if they don't support it, then find other people that support that. We find that relationships are built on supporting each other's goals. When we help each other's goals, we become friends. When we don't support each other's goals, we are no longer together.
No matter what your goals are this year, we hope that this episode helps you follow through, and from all of us on the Big Brains team, Happy New Year.
Big Brains is a production of the University of Chicago Podcast Network. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review. The show is hosted by Paul M. Rand and produced by me, Matt Hodap, and Leah Caesarine. Thanks for listening.